Hello again, and welcome to Living the Tao.
Hello, I'm Taoist Master Mikel Steenrod.
And I'm Morgan. Thank you for joining us on this walk today. Today we're going to be discussing Tao as other. So when I was in college, we talked about, in literature and stuff, we talked about how there's a sense that the world and everything in a story is not you. And I think that by and large, humans are comfortable with things that are other, that are outside of themselves, because they can observe them and they can say, oh, well, that's not me, and it's a way of not being responsible for certain things. And I think from our comments and from just talking about Daoism and also other spiritualities, people see spirituality or their system as something outside of themselves that they are viewing and that they can maybe be part of but not be of. Does that make sense?
I understand what you're saying, but I'm not understanding what you're asking.
I'm asking, we often say that Taoism is, that the Tao is everything. But what part of the Tao are we?
The human part? I'm not really.
Well, it's confusing because you don't have the question. The question that I'm trying to get to, and maybe this won't work, I don't know. The question I'm trying to get to is, as a human, I feel like we feel like we're separate from nature and separate from, a deity. We're separate from some judgmental force. But Taoism says that we're not. Why does it feel like, maybe this is too philosophical, but why does it feel like, and how do we overcome the feeling that we are separate from everything around us and that we're just a little jellyfish that is subject to much powerful, larger, and more like mystical on some level forces?
Well, that separation that you're discussing is the social mind. There's no doubt about it. And the problem that you're describing is that the social mind is a misrepresentation of reality, to put it in like a very general terminology.
Okay.
And so that misrepresentation creates a sense that somehow we're not part of everything. And that has actually never been a problem of Taoism. So there's never been the presumption that we're not part of everything. That the separation, as it has grown stronger, and it has grown stronger over time, this is one of the areas that's actually discussed in higher practice. As the separation increases,
the apparent separation, or the separation between social mind and
the true reality, let's say that
okay.
way. In the true reality, the connection is obvious. Outside of the true reality, the connection is not obvious.
Yes.
Basically, you have to separate the individual and separate their connection from the greater reality in order for the social mind to exist. So by its very nature, it requires separation. And the movement against that separation, or the feeling that a person is separated, is simply feeling the social mind. It's one of the reasons that you generally don't want to be part of the social mind. It's like one of the core arguments of Daoism. So
yeah, because it disempowers you. Is that right?
Yes. Well, the fact is that religion many religions are social religions, not all religions, but especially many of the more modern religions are. And religions, as they moved into a modern era, if they survived, they were social religions.
Meaning, what does that mean?
They have a social agenda, they're there to determine law, and they're almost always bound into politics. But for them to exist, and for political power to exist, you have to have separation. And because that's the only way you can concentrate power in the hands of a small number of people, independent of reality.
Because they want to be the conduit. They want to be the channel. They want to be the gatekeeper
Right,
for reality.
They get to determine belonging. So, and if you already have a sense of belonging and a sense of love, then because the
belonging
core
with a capital B, like
Yeah. belonging to anything. If you think about it, a lot of politics requires a conflict over belonging. And so essentially, if you are part of whatever major political trend exists, then you belong to it.
Yes.
And then you have a competition of belonging, which is my belonging is better than your belonging.
Yeah.
And the reason that belonging is a drive is because it's also how humans interpret love. And so if you don't belong anywhere, then you're not loved. If you're given that straight out of the gate,
By everything.
right, which is essentially, no, you already belong and you are always loved.
And you don't have to qualify, and you don't have to be something special
Right.
or different.
And it completely negates the drive of most politics, which is to control those elements so that you must go to the tap of getting a little high and low hobbit thing going on here. At least I got to be Gandalf. So.
Force perspective, yeah. We're trying a new path today. So, the sense that any of us or anything is separate from another is it's a forced perspective enforced by social mind
Yeah.
in order to keep us in our place.
And anytime you see, one of the surest indicators of that is anytime you see a link between religion and politics, which I've talked about pretty much every time in one form or another, is you are looking at a manipulation. Doesn't matter whether or not it's pro or against what you're doing, it relies upon certain separations that are artificial. And so you must always be cautious around them. So, a quick side note. Let's take ancient Egypt.
Okay, we like to go back to ancient Egypt.
So ancient Egypt was around for thousands of years. And near the end of its imperial period, one of the conquerors it had as it moved into the modern era
yeah.
was the Muslim Caliphate.
Okay.
And the Muslim Caliphate, because they were effectively tribal, weren't used to running this massive state of Egypt, which required tons of expertise,
Oh, yeah.
specialties with cities. They've been around for thousands of years, got all that smoothed out. So they weren't interested in running it and basically said, you run it, we get paid this amount,
Oh, okay.
we're good.
Yeah.
And we could go into that history more, but what happened was that the Caliphate decided to charge non-Muslims a religious tax.
Okay.
If you weren't a Muslim, you had to pay this tax.
Okay.
It wasn't egregious. It wasn't designed to convert people. They had no desire to do that.
Okay.
And rather than pay the tax, the average Egyptian decided, you know what, I'm going to convert to Islam.
Oh, okay.
That way I don't have to pay this tax. Initially,
Very pragmatic.
for a very long period of time, the Muslims denied the shift of any Egyptian to Islam because they didn't want to lose the tax money.
Oh,
And they were basically like, well, I mean, you can change, but the tax is going to stay the same. So, and then there were a rule, and it changed over time. But that was the initial thing. So, thousands of years of a religion people were willing to abandon because of a tax.
to save a little money.
And we're not talking, not egregious, not give me 50%. It's like,
Yeah.
you're paying sales tax type of thing.
Right.
So they were just willing to go, screw you gods, toss them into the bin, and I am now whatever gets me out of this tax.
Yeah. Okay.
So, but also consider that the Egyptian religious system and the state were always integrated because the emperor or the pharaoh was a god. And so what they're really rejecting is this model of governance that was no longer really the dominant government.
Right.
Because there was no pharaoh. It was being ruled by the caliphate. And so why pay the unnecessary tax for something that is effectively
non-existent?
right? It's a dead political system. And for most people, that is what the association between religion and politics has done, is to create a thing where belonging to it is to belong to a particular politic. And if you want to reject it, the reason that you can do that is because it doesn't actually reflect who you are. It reflects your belonging in a particular group. So there isn't really a binding to your personal need and your personal nature. You may like what it says for a period of time, but you put a little tax on it and you're not going to like it anymore.
I feel like people really identify with their beliefs.
I feel like if you were to charge them a 5% surcharge, they would immediately drop it.
All right.
And the reason I say that is, one, to be partly snarky, and two, that's what history says very clearly.
Wow.
So
how does that, so you can't control people if they already feel like they belong and they are already loved, because that's what people are searching or trying to fill by being part of a club, right?
well, yes, and that's one of the reasons that Taoists have been regarded as insanely dangerous for thousands of years, is that we start off with a basic premise of, you already got that, what are you doing?
Well, how come then, why is there a Daoism? Why is there?
Because the bulk of Taoism, the first bulk of Taoism has to do with fighting the social mind. Or you can sit back and say, oh, it's a religion of blah, blah, blah. Its sole purpose is to fight the social mind. That's it.
So it arose as a necessity in opposition to social mind.
Yes. And we could go all the way through the Confucian argumentations, meaning the conflicts between Confucianism, which was a representation of ordered society and government for the purpose of, or religion for the purpose of exalting government.
Right.
And use that as a model because it was the first real super exploration of the concept. But that is actually what it is at its core. And as I've mentioned before, the mind at one time was much, much weaker than it is now.
The social mind.
The social mind. And so a person with modest effort could provide a path out for themselves if they wanted to.
They could figure it out themselves.
If they went into, that's the reason that the natural path exists, is that the mind was weak enough that if you, let's say, were of honest intent and you went into the woods and did not die,
you could extract it yourself.
you could distance yourself from it and gain a measure of freedom. And as you do that, there are problems and challenges for it, and that's what Taoism is about.
I see.
here's a tool set. If you're really going to go out there and try to build this house yourself, at least take the tools.
Here's some tools. Here's some
Here's
tips.
an instruction booklet.
I could figure that when Social Mind was weaker, it just seemed completely insane to the way people used to live, and there was a comparison. But now we're so deep into it that it just seems normal. It's been normalized.
Well, it requires extraordinary effort now, which is not really something
to remove yourself from the social mind. Yeah,
and extraordinary effort is not something that you want to have before you in order to achieve what's really basic freedom. And so like a basic internal freedom, but that's the condition now. And that's why you'll still get people, they'll go, well, I'll do the natural path. And it's like, well, one, you have no natural skills, so I'm not really going to bet on your ability to survive in the woods.
And you don't know what reality looks like, so you wouldn't even know it if you stumbled upon it.
Right. The only way that that is successful is if the Tao itself intrudes, and it does do that, and it is periodically successful. But it always boils down to percentages. Like for that pathway to work, you have to be an outlier, and not just the guy who got an odd degree in this and then one playing craps at Vegas type of thing. And that happens.
A Taoist genius.
Yeah, that happens. We're talking about you're born to it, and the Tao has marked you from infancy on up through to take this pathway.
Whoa.
Type of thing. So unless you're that one in however many generations, you're not going to be successful at it. So
we're going to take this path over here.
Okay.
All new paths. Yeah. And we talked about before, you can risk it, but chances are the forest is going to get you.
Yeah, I mean, it's the risk of the natural pathway. And, but that doesn't change the fact that belonging is automatically there. And so what you really have to do is that the sense of otherness that people have is really a distrust of the social mind. As you're sitting there and going, well, this is casting me in some form of myself that I don't want to be.
Oh, you don't recognize your own self in the eyes of the social mind.
Right, because it's not you. It's not who you actually, at your basic level, stripped of everything around you, it's not who you actually are. And at a basic, and even if a person can't express that themselves, they can recognize it. As the language, right, the language for a thing comes much later than the experience of a thing. And so we can experience it and then spend years trying to associate language with some experiences.
Yeah.
And did you not experience it? No, you experienced it, you just didn't have words for it. And in particular, Americans with English really don't have any language to express that process because it's not part of American culture at all. And so we're kind of in an anti-spiritual but bound into religion culture.
Whoa,
and,
that's a paradoxical position, isn't it?
It is if you believe that religion is or isn't the pathway to spirituality. But
well, I think it presents itself thusly. So maybe that lack of language is another way of disempowering us. I don't know. That's a sidetrack.
I mean, I would say you're right, but it is also a sidetrack. So you're right on two counts. And it's one of the reasons I can, for example, do this talk here as we're walking along, is that I've actually spent years discussing the concept, so I have language associations that other people might not have.
Because you've explored deeply.
And both through myself, through apprentices, through other people, consulting, I've seen that process there. And I also have the language terminologies that exist outside of common experience. So when you have the language, it's easier to point out the experience, but you don't actually need the language to point out the experience. It's there. You may simply not be able to speak about it effectively, which is actually something that's written about and talked about within Taoism for a long period of time.
In some ways, that's just life, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we don't go around describing every experience we have. And that's poetry and song and music.
Well, even walking down this path here, we could easily just point at one or two things where we don't know the words for it.
That's true.
Actually, we probably point at most of those things and not know the words for it. Not really know anything about its nature, not know anything about its cycle of existence, not know any of that. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Right.
And so it exists. We're experiencing it. We just don't have associations of language for it or other ways of classifying it. And that doesn't mean it's not there.
Yes. Woo-hoo-hoo.
Gusty.
Gusty, very gusty today. So it's an illusion of comfort to think that I am separate from, well, whatever it is, in this case the Tao, but it could be, we like to think of ourselves as not just animals on the surface of the planet. We're separate from nature, we're separate from, but that just gives us a little bit of an ego boost, but it's superficial.
In our bodies.
Because we're looking for belonging to our special club of humans while disavowing our belonging to the greater Tao. There's some irony.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with you. So to a point of where I don't understand where the conflict is.
I know. That's why I'm here. The conflict is that the real answer is to just go, I don't have to be in a special club of humans. Oh, this almost choked me up. I can be just in reality, just with the universe.
Yes, if you stop yourself from not doing that, that is true.
That's the thing. Why do we learn to not do that?
Well, now you're getting into an element of how the social mind is brought about, why it exists, a wide variety of other talks like that. But
that's kind of the essence, that the social mind wants us to feel abandoned and wants us to feel lonely.
Well, the social mind requires a separation from reality. It may be that humans, so this is going to be slightly technical, which may or may not appeal to people.
Let's go. Let's do it.
It may be that humans are incapable of directly interacting with reality. We may have to pass through a representative layer in order to make contact with reality, and we carry that representative layer in ourselves, which is the reason it's called a mind. It's not actually a mind, but that's the reason it's called a mind. There isn't another word for it. Well, there are in some sects, but let's say that that's true.
Okay.
The difference is that, let's say that is inherent to human nature. Somehow, somewhere along the line, the representation became hugely corrupted. And the only way to change it is to change the representation so it better matches reality.
Okay, yes.
However, that's not an intellectual process. Saying that it is the social mind creates within people this thought that it's an intellectual thing, and suddenly if you're thinking a magic thought here or a magic thought there, then you're going to be in alignment with reality and everything will adjust. It actually doesn't matter what you think. The state is perceptual. And it's important to think things because thinking is part of who you are, but it is not all of who you are, and the mind applies to all of who you are. But what happens is that part of your inherent nature leaks out from around it because it's not capable of completely suppressing everything. That's the extent of the role of the mind, and it is horrible. There's no doubt about that. However, no part of the mind says that its false interpretation needs to be loneliness, isolation, and all these other factors. No part of it says that it needs to be a handoff of power over yourself to somebody else. No part of it does that. That's humans. So humans very specifically skewed the social mind so that it does certain things. The social mind wants separation, but it doesn't care about how it's achieved. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Isn't the social mind an invention of humans?
That is unlikely.
Wait, what?
The particular manifestation of the social mind is taken advantage of by humans. There's no doubt about that. But if you're talking about was the social mind created by humans, it is unlikely because it persists even in very deep states. It just becomes a much smaller thing.
So it's its own entity.
Yes, it is. At this point, it is.
But, okay, this is going to be another video.
Considering that centuries were spent defining it, I imagine it will maybe constitute one more 30-minute video. So.
We can't fit it in the 2 minutes we have left. All right.
Yes, it is horrible. Yes, large parts of it, large elements of its manifestation are unnecessary, meaning that the social mind doesn't require it. And but the social mind is also its own thing. So
we've customized it to make us feel
even worse. Yes.
Yeah, as comfortable as we can, which is to make us feel worse. Because most humans like discomfort.
I think you're being generous in some ways. I think it was intentionally built to create discomfort, but in the long term. But now we're entering into the realm of speculation. So there are things which are absolutely known about the social mind and the limitations it imposes upon humans. That whole thing of like, it's not true, but that whole thing of, your average person uses 10% of their brain.
Oh, yeah.
That's the result of the social mind. A human without that, a human in its true form, something that is called true human, is vastly more powerful than a human with it. So, but part of that is you get a sense of belonging and continuous love from the universe.
From the universe.
Ironically, none of that would really have to disappear, maybe. So,
you mean
I don't go around designing the social mind, so I don't know. But
like the social mind's not completely incompatible with that. You could live in the social mind and get that.
Well, you always are going to live in the representation. That's highly likely.
Okay.
If you're living in a representation that becomes a social mind, you do need a sense of separation, because as soon as you regain, let's say, unity with the greater Tao, that social mind kind of changes so that it fits the Tao now. So that's a fundamental challenge to it. And but it's been around for a long time.
And we're used to it.
Yeah.
And we need the eggs.